unlikely band of brothers. Tough, but are they loyal? If Shepard can't gain their trust, they're all as good as dead.
Mass Effect 2 is one of the best role-playing, cinematic, and character-driven experiences of the last decade. Dialogue choices and their preceding relationship branches made every dynamic feel like they were wholly your own. Its focus on building relationships with your crewmates not only contributed to the gravity of the story and those characters' fates, but also made for solid side quest loyalty missions that set a new standard for role-playing games. There's a lot about the game that other RPGs can relate to, but it's its unique ability to capture real-life emotions and made-up characters, and the control it gives you over those relationships and major decisions in the story that make this a worthwhile standout.
Fallout New Vegas is easily one of the best open-world RPGs ever made. Obsidian expanded on the foundation that Bethesda built and poured outstanding and memorable characters and conflicts into a really distinctive setting that's unlike anything we've ever seen. Several factions with deep shades of grey characters populate the Wastes with interesting moral decisions, making the conflict between the New California Republic, Kaiser's Legion, and the mysterious Mr. House feel like anything but a black and white choice between good and evil. The fact that we get to decide the outcome makes it even better. Well, the graphics might not be all that modern anymore, but the story and gameplay are as strong as ever. And hey, if you're on PC, you can spruce it up with some mods.
He's here!
Arkham City nails it all. The combat, the feeling of being in and traversing a big desolate Gotham City, the villains, the story, the voice actors, the graphics. This game aims its batarang very high and doesn't miss. Batman has always been my favorite superhero, and Arkham City took the Bat Breakthrough gameplay formula for Arkham Asylum and expanded it to its most fully realized form ever. And that ending, my goodness, that was incredible. What part of this is the best Batman game ever made doesn't appeal to you?
Even 8 years after the fact, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, I think, is still one of the single best RPGs on the market. Its massive world is so meticulously littered with wonderful adventures and gorgeous art that it's actually somewhat difficult, I think, to complete the main story without just getting hopelessly sidetracked, which is honestly like the best problem to have. The feeling of not knowing what's around the corner or maybe over a mountain in the distance, but you can't wait to find out. So if you still haven't played Skyrim in 2019, A, what are you waiting for? B, I don't know that you should. It's a little bit risky. I mean, there's a chance you'll play for a couple of hours, enjoy what's there, and walk away, but it's also kind of dangerous because your friends and your family may not hear from you for weeks. It's that immersive, I think.
I think the things that make The Last of Us one of the best games in its genre is simply the craft that has gone into this game. This single story and this narrative that is so important that you can tell it matters to the developers, to the animators, to the level designers and game designers, to the actors, to the screenwriters. Everyone is driving toward the single goal and this focus that is creating this incredibly dark and brutal world, but showing the humanity that lives within it. I think The Last of Us really feels like the truest evolution of where the studio's gone from its early beginnings. Game stories and character development and all these things when we talk about narrative story-driven games, and I think there are few characters that feel so fully realized and so lived in a world as Joel and Ellie do.
Dota 2 is complex and takes an incredible amount of time to even begin to master one of its 5 roles. That's not to say you can't enjoy this game casually and sign in during special events in game modes. Dota's tough, but if you're down for the challenge, it'll definitely be a game experience you'll unlikely find anywhere else. Dota 2's community can be a little hit and miss, but one of the things I've loved seeing is smaller groups pop up within it that thrive more than most purely competitive online gaming scenes that I've been a part of. I'm one of the lucky players to have essentially found a second family through Dota 2. I want to be better at Dota 2, and it's one of the few games where I can learn from and with my friends. Dota 2 is one of the deepest team strategy games I've ever played. Since I started playing it in late 2013, I've seen it undergo so many significant changes that, while not always perfect, continue to make it an engaging and exciting game to learn. Very few games can offer an experience like that.
Was the group hugs out of the question? Rockstar Games, the studio that invented the modern sandbox genre, raised the bar once more with a sprawling, intricately detailed reimagining of San Andreas, in which they told a scathing Dickensian crime opera that satirized every facet of 21st century America, from tech startups to immigration law to gamer bros, while still managing to be a fun video game, and then they spent 6 years keeping its online multiplayer interesting. GTA 5 is low-key one of the angriest games ever made, setting its sights metaphorically and literally on a laundry list of things wrong with American society, specifically in 21st century California. Grand Theft Auto 5 is the third best-selling video game of all time, behind Tetris and Minecraft, but you know what GTA has that they don't? Circles! And thank God, because can you imagine how hard it would be to steal a car that has square wheels?
Assassin's Creed 4 is still the best Assassin's Creed game, don't at me. I love Odyssey, but pirate ships, people. You get rid of all the climbing, killing, and sneaking in Assassin's Creed 4, and you'd still be left with an amazing pirate ship combat game set in a big, open ocean. You can just rove the ocean picking fights with enemy ships, but you can also encounter legendary ships, even a ghost ship. They're all really tough boss battles, the sort of puzzle to figure out for each. If you've played Odyssey, and you've played Origins, this is the next Assassin's Creed you should play.
But beware, the frailty of men.
From Dark Souls to Sekiro, the From Software formula of giant, formidable bosses and twitchy, precision-based combat is one that players can count on by now, but Bloodborne took that formula and made encounters faster and more visceral, and turned the speed and ferocity of each conflict into something much more intense. Pairing that intensity with a sprawling, terrifying, horror-themed world created one of the greatest and most atmospheric action games ever made. Bloodborne is a game that keeps giving. The sheer amount of weapons, sub-weapons, enemy variety, items, bosses, and entire sections of the game that are completely optional, not to mention unique ways you can build out your character each time, makes Bloodborne feel infinitely replayable. I almost completely gave up on this game after my first few hours of playing it. I almost quit my favorite game of the decade. It kicked my ass up and down its wet, horrible streets repeatedly. But if you look up some beginner's guides, some tips, learn some combat basics, start grinding, leveling up, you'll find one of the most rewarding and satisfying video game experiences ever made. I promise you.
The Witcher 3 is obviously one of the best games of the decade. I mean, it's probably the best fantasy RPG ever made. Sorry, Skyrim. You know, the end of the game pays off in all of the ways that Mass Effect 3 promised it would and kind of didn't, and it only took one game to do it. So if you're watching this, you've probably played The Witcher 3. But if by some small miracle you haven't, please, for your own sake, do it. Between the masterpiece that's the core game and then what are legitimately two of the best expansion packs ever made for video games, you're just doing yourself a disservice by leaving this in your backlog.
You should join us. We could always use more good people.
The new Colossus took the really excellent bones of Wolfenstein: The New Order, like its inherent campy weirdness and its blood-soaked violence, tightened it up, chucked in some of the best characters in the series, and added a really traumatic childhood storyline to boot. The new Colossus is a rare example of a game that has something to say, but is also an incredibly fun time, moment to moment. This is a game made by a developer who is not afraid to be political or go extremely large with absolutely everything. It's an incredible experience full of moments that will stay with me forever.
The gods of these realms don't take kindly to outsiders, trust me. When they find you, and they will, they'll make things difficult.
You should play God of War for so many reasons. God of War not only elevates the technical heights of the series, but it actually reflects on what's come before it. It doesn't just let Kratos remain static, giving us an entirely new shade of this character that feels consistent with who he was while simultaneously expanding on our understanding of him and this world through a beautiful new story and just incredible gameplay. God of War ultimately belongs here because the entire experience is so moving, so intricately put together, and so revelatory in its evolution of a gaming icon.